While the world is still just grappling with the implications of the Web 2.0 and the internet, as we know, um, one audacious government regulator and a powerful woman who is taking these challenges, regulating the Web 3.0 for regulating the Web 3.0 head on. And she has announced, game on. It's my honor to introduce Julie Inman Grant, the E-Safety Commissioner of Australia from Government of Australia, to share with us the role of safety in the metaverse. Julie is Australia's E-Safety Commissioner, and in this role, Julie leads the world's first government agency committed to keeping its citizens safer online. And she's spearheaded eSafety's image-based abuse portal, launched in October 2017, now eSafety Tools. And Julie's extensive experience with nonprofits, government sector, she spent 2 decades working on senior public policy, safety tools in the tech industry at Microsoft, at Twitter, Adobe. The commissioner's career experience began in DC, working with the US Congress and nonprofit sector before taking a role at Microsoft. Julie's experience spans over many, many years, serving as one of the company's Microsoft's first and the largest standing government relations professional, ultimately the role of Global eSafety Director for Safety Policy and Outreach. And at Twitter, she set up and drove the company's policy, safety, and philanthropy programs across Australia, New Zealand, and South Asia. As commissioner, Julie plays such an important role, a global role, as the chair of Child Dignity Alliance Technical Working Group and a board member for We Protect Global Alliance. Julie, it is such an honor of mine to have you here with you. Please take it away.
Oh, thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thanks everybody for being here. I'm honored to provide my first virtual keynote ever at such an important event. And I was doing some practicing because I was worried I was going to have a Jennifer Lawrence ballroom moment, which was very cute when it was her, but I didn't want to trip going up the stairs. Anyway, this is an opportunity to bring those of us together who can really make a difference in ushering in a new era of online safety. And I think in order for us to really inhabit a much safer online world and a metaverse, this truly needs to be a global effort with the right mindset, a common purpose, and a commitment to improving online safety from both the ground up and the top down. And I do believe that together we can lead fundamental change that will benefit all of our citizens around the globe. And as Australia's eSafety Commissioner, I lead Australia's efforts to do just that. So, created in 2015, I head up the first government online safety regulator in the world. Our purpose is the protection of all Australians online. And we have a powerful combination of functions that operate under 3 distinct pillars, and we believe that they need to work in tandem to enable real change. The first, protection. Through our reporting and investigative schemes, we support individuals experiencing online harm, and then we have powers to compel takedown of both illegal and seriously harmful content, and to find perpetrators and platforms along with a range of other civil powers. And I think this is really important because for too long, people have been able to abuse with impunity, and so we hope this also has a deterrent effect. Just making sure I've got the second pillar as prevention in my slide. I don't want to turn around and lose my place or get dizzy. Great. Anyway, the second pillar, of course, is prevention, and we do this through our research, education, and training programs. And of course, we want to stop the harms from happening in the first place so that we don't have to use those regulatory tools. And we've seen evidence of real behavioral change over the past 5 years as a result of these efforts, including about 4 years ago when I came into this role, about 50% of kids would talk to a trusted adult when something went wrong online, often because they were afraid of device denial, or that, they knew more about technology than their parents and they didn't think they could help. But really, we forget that we have this experience in maturity. And as someone was saying to me, you can't unsee some of this harmful content. So we've seen over the past 4 years almost a 20-point increase through a range of programs and messaging. That means that kids are actually talking to trusted adults when things go wrong online, and that's a great outcome. So the third pillar is the one that I'll focus most on, and that's what I call proactive and systemic change. And this is where we're really trying to encourage the tech sector to take more responsibility and build that safety in from the ground up, baking it in rather than bolting it on, as we often say. And do this through assessing risk and by anticipating getting ahead of technology trends and challenges. And that's one of the things that we try and do through some of our position papers. And we did one earlier this year on immersive technologies before we knew that this was going to be called the metaverse. But we always want to look at use cases, but then sort of assess, what does rape by default in the metaverse look like, and think about, because we know that there are myriad creative ways that humans in the real world can misuse technology, and it is a little bit of an arms race. We're never going to be able to, war game everything that could go wrong, but we figure we should give it a shot. So, I often use auto analogies to explain safety by design, from the theoretical to the practical. And when you think about it, we get into our cars today, we almost take for granted that the seat belts will be embedded and that the airbags will deploy, and thankfully that the brakes will work, because safety is built in by design and it's been guided by international standards for decades. And I think as technologies evolve, we may opt to drive cars with high safety ratings, and we may choose cars with premium safety features like lane change alerts or rear view cameras. And we see that automakers are actually competing based on safety. But 55 years ago, when Ralph Nader wrote Unsafe at Any Speed, car manufacturers violently pushed back. And this is what we think we need more of for the technology sector, those virtual seatbelts embedded so that we can protect our vulnerable citizens and our kids from accessing the darkest recesses of the web. And this is how prevention, protection, and proactive change can work together in tandem to keep both the roads and the vehicles safer, but also to keep all of us safer on the road, even on that virtual road. And again, I do think we should expect the same thing of technology companies. Maybe a little bit less of startups and burgeoning companies than the larger, more mature companies. So on the next slide, I think we can make no mistake about it, particularly for the mature companies. The platforms have known the harms for a long time, for decades, and they know how their platforms have been systematically weaponized. What we need them to do now is to better assess these risks and mitigate the harms by developing and deploying a safety by design mindset across the life cycle of every product, service, or platform. And this also includes platform refreshes. And it's our job to help them do just that. And I'm being absolutely honest when I say we want them to be successful at this. We want industry to succeed, because if you succeed, then we succeed, and our users are all safer. And we want positive platforms. We want to reduce toxicity. So you may know that we at eSafety have been championing the Safety by Design initiative since 2018. And we wanted to bring the technology sector along on this journey. Having spent 22 years in the industry myself, I knew this was something that we had to do genuinely with them rather than to them, because this does represent a huge cultural shift in terms of how online services are conceptualized, designed, and ultimately deployed. From moving fast and breaking things to moving a bit more mindfully. And you know what? I believe this makes good business sense, but I also believe that innovation and investment are really a part of this, and we can innovate for safety. Now, the tech sector is diverse, and no regulator is going to be able to dictate or prescribe what the best safety protections are for any and all given products. If I learned anything in industry, it was that. So we needed a set of robust principles to guide this work that all of the major players could agree on. So after about 9 months of deep consultation with over 80 organizations, we arrived at 3 key pillars in 2019. And these are defining service provider responsibility, providing user empowerment and autonomy, and then demonstrating much more radical transparency and accountability. And we understood that the principles needed to be actionable, meaningful, and achievable. And that the approach also needed to, as I say, encourage this innovation and investment. And we also wanted to laud companies who are doing this well and to surface up and incentivize good safety practice, but also teach those. Um, you know, when I was in industry, we used to talk a lot about co-opetition. We cooperate on some things, we compete on other things. Now, I think safety is an area where we really shouldn't be competing unless it's the race to the top. And so we should be sharing these best practices. Next slide, please. So after these were really embraced by so many technology leaders, we started to see a proliferation of tech principles, whether they were AI principles or ethics principles or voluntary principles. And I think this led to a certain degree of what principles fatigue. And the truth is, principles are really great for galvanizing people and getting them on the same page and creating frameworks. But principles are only as good as they are actioned and implemented in good safety practice. So we knew we need to go further. Next slide, please. So after about 18 months of consultation with more than 180 organizations, and you can imagine this took deep consultation and audits, and talking to people about how their content moderation policies worked and how their trust and safety divisions were set up, but also looking at the safety tech sector and for companies that decide not to build their own content moderation or trust and safety functions, who could they outsource to? And of course, we're seeing a lot more content moderation platforms. We're seeing a lot more trust and safety as a service coming to market as well, which is really exciting. So of course, we released 2 interactive safety by design assessment tools, one for startups and one for mid-tier and enterprise companies. Next slide, please. Now, these tools take participants through a set of questions to ask what systems, processes, and practices they have in place. What's their focus? How do users or digital humans interact on their platforms? And then each participant's response generates a tailored report that acts as both a safety health check, but also as a learning resource so that we can promote continual online safety improvements. And critically, the tools support innovation, as I said, and guide users to think critically about the need to consult and work with diverse communities in particular to ensure that their product offering is inclusive and safe for all users. And we have about 5 phases of safety by design, and we're in some of these later phases where we're specifically focused on vulnerable communities. When we started with the safety by design principles, we also consulted with parents, but mostly children. And we did a 5-day intensive interactive forum where we actually walked young people through, what the tools were, how they worked, and really wanted to get a sense of how they were using technology and what they wanted to see, what they expected of the technology leaders and the technology providers they were using. And I have to say, work that we did with the young people on the youth vision statement was probably the most illuminating work we did. No offense, but even better than what we gleaned from the platforms in some cases. Next slide. So again, our goal was to more deeply embed safety into the culture, ethos, and operations of the business. So from the product conception through to implementation. And we are hoping and do believe this will engender a culture of innovation, will motivate tech workers who really want to create technology for good. I know I was one of those people who I think I entered the industry with rose-colored glasses, but there's so many people that work in the industry that are good people and want to see good happening. That's probably while you're all here. But we also want companies to be to preempt these damaging tech wrecks that I don't believe are inevitable. And I'm not to pick on Zoom. I actually think they're doing such a great job. But just as an example, in 2019, I think they had 10 million daily active users. They scaled absolutely beautifully during the early stages of the pandemic, and by March 2020, I think they had something like 200 million users, up from 10 million just a few months prior. But then you'll all recall the Zoom bombing happened, and there were concerns about their encryption and their safety and privacy settings, and they took it offline. But it was really interesting to see the CEO, Edwan, after they came out of crisis mode, saying, "Oh, I never really thought about online harassment before until this happened." And you kind of think to yourself, how can you build an interactive platform and not think about what might go wrong when you've got humans in the frame? But I think that's often how founders work. They're focused on the elegance and the efficacy of their technology. And so that's what these tools are for startups. They're meant to be very educative, so that no company can say again, we didn't know the harms. We didn't know how platforms were weaponized. We didn't know how other companies were dealing with this. So next slide, please. And I'm in Brussels today. This sounds weird. I'm an American working as the Australian E-Safety Commissioner. I'm in Brussels. I was at this internet forum today. It was so incredible to see industry leaders from Microsoft, Google, TikTok, Meta, Snap, Yubo. There were a whole range of companies there that I really do believe are starting to adopt that safety by design ethos and are starting to create more true cultural change through shifting the design ethos. And I think we want the same for the metaverse. Only this time we can actually change the design ethos more close to the beginning. And we can advocate one that moves thoughtfully so that we can actually shape the future of VR and make sure, and AR and MR, and make sure that it has the future take up that I think it promises. Next slide, please. So I just want you to know we're not stopping there. This 5-phase roadmap, we've actually developed tools for venture capitalists so that they can invest ethically and manage their own risks. So beyond our interactive assessment tools, our VR checklists and due diligence clauses, I know that's getting you excited, and that's why I'm shaking my head a little bit. But we also want to shape a new generation of future engineers, lawyers, entrepreneurs, data scientists, and others that code with conscience. And we believe that safety by design needs to be taught alongside the fundamentals of ICT. So in Australia, we've been successful in ensuring that safety by design concepts are now incorporated into Australia's school curriculum. And then we're piloting concepts across multidisciplinary programs at a number of Australian universities, everything from business ethics, to product design, to engineering. Next slide, please. With all types of digital technology, immersive technologies can be used for harms such as cyberbullying, harming children for online sexual abuse, and also sharing intimate content of someone. By providing these hyper-realistic experiences where virtual sensations actually feel real, immersive technologies could also increase the impact of negative interactions and sadly lead to a rise in online assaults and abuse, which could feel very, very real. For example, groping or other sexual assault might be experienced virtually through a haptic suit. Augmented realities could be used to fake a sexually explicit three-dimensional image or video of a real person and then interact with it without their consent. And a virtual experience may feel private because you're physically isolated, but if you use it to create an intimate image or video, the file could be live streamed, stored, stolen, or shared without consent. Now, eSafety does have some concerns about the use of immersive technologies as a tool for online child sexual abuse. Hiding behind an avatar or a fictional character in a game within a metaverse could allow a predator to pretend to be a friend, often the same age as the child they're targeting, and then persuade them into sexualized conversations and actions online or in person. We see this playing out all the time on other forms of social networks. And of course, we see predators using fake or imposter profiles, really gaining the child's trust over weeks and months, and then often taking them off platform to, say, ephemeral sites where they don't leave an evidence trail. Now, children and young people are still developing their critical reasoning skills and may not be able to recognize virtual risks that may be more easily influenced by, and they could be manipulated by avatars in an exciting hyper-realistic environment. So this is not to kind of be fatalistic, and this is why our prevention efforts are really, really important. In terms of developing, what are the types of things that kids should be thinking about? How do we know that avatar, and we know that people, often like to have a different identity in the virtual world, but um, discerning that fact and fiction and who's who in the online zoo is going to be an important question, I think, for young people. I think it's also important to be aware that while immersive technologies have shown benefits for some people with disability, not all devices are designed inclusively. And I think a failure to design immersive technologies with safety and inclusive access in mind may lead to greater inequalities and social division. And again, we see this playing out online in many, many ways, say with targeted online harassment. I mean, we could even go back to Gamergate, all those years ago, but we see it constantly. We see volumetric attacks and pylons, often targeting women and those intersectional characteristics. And we know that those that are of diverse minorities, diverse sexualities or genders, or have a disability are 3 times more likely than the everyday white avatar, which sounds very vanilla to me. Um, and and so we need to understand that this can entrench racism and gender inequality, and make sure that we are designing inclusively. And this is where safety by design is about both re-engineering the online world we have now, but also surfacing the need for further innovations as technologies evolve. And the role of safety in the metaverse is vital. So we do need to fix the fundamentals first, but so much of what our safety by design assessment tools surface up is the safety functionality that is missing. And there is today and will continue to be huge opportunities to innovate in this new and immersive space. From NFTs to VR headsets and haptic suit technology. We were talking about teledildonics earlier, and a lot of people's eyes either perk up or glaze over. But we are talking about IoT devices, and we need to make sure that privacy and security are baked into these as well. And we do just need to continue thinking about anticipating emerging risks and harm, innovating and engineering out misuse where possible, and eliminating this before the harms occur. What I often say, it's really safety as a forethought rather than an afterthought. So next slide, please. I just want to say, the assessment tools are not our first foray into immersive technologies. Our future casting work has also seen us develop the Immersive Technologies Tech Trends position paper that I recommend you look at. If you have feedback, let us know. We're at esafety.gov.au. I want to understand what you're thinking about, other positive use cases you might be thinking about, other risks that you might have come across. Again, humans have incredible potential for creativity, but they can also creatively misuse technologies. Just the other month, we had a child report serious cyberbullying on Spotify. Somebody had actually written and recorded a mean song targeting him. And he couldn't get it down. It was causing him a lot of distress. We reached out to Spotify, and they had it down within a matter of hours. So we would love to continue working proactively with XRSI and the broader community, so that and particularly regional immersive technology industry bodies, so that we can ensure that the needs of industry, your industry, are considered and addressed as the online world and the virtual world we live and work in evolves. And I think this group of immersive technology pioneers, you're early adopters, and you're thinking about this actively, and that's fantastic. So next slide, please. And I'm about to wrap up. I just hope we all find ways to talk about how to improve the overall ecosystem through global systemic changes. And I do think we need to do this together and to actively shape the metaverse of the future. We don't want the weaponization of deep fakes or the exploitation of algorithms or a totally decentralized internet or a crazy lawless anarchic metaverse without the ability to remediate harm. Really sort of suppressing the potential of these new worlds. And I want us to create digital environment we all want and deserve. And we need to ensure that consumers, users, digital humans all over the globe have their own seatbelt moment, just like the car manufacturers did over 50 years ago. And that we all have a time that we just might take for granted, that safety protections are built into our online services, just as they are our cars. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. And I'm just gonna, I know that you have a very, very tight schedule, but if you would mind to spare a couple of minutes, I know Joshua was asking if, only if you have time, we can maybe ask
Yeah, sure.
questions. Okay, Joshua, please
Yeah,
go
you
ahead.
have a little bit of time for some questions, Julie?
Yeah. No, I
Okay,
can't
great.
promise I'll answer them, but I'll do my very best.
That's totally fair. Well, first, let's all give a little emoji round of applause for
Oh,
Julie.
thank
Thank you so
you.
much for that wonderful talk. It was super informative, and I'm just well, I know everybody here at XRSI feels really blessed to have you joining us here today. So, all right. Well, I see Salim. Salim, you have a question. If you open your mic, I will amplify you. So go ahead and unmute yourself. Are you there, Salim?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Okay, great. Yeah, because it was
Salim,
like
thanks
that,
for
the
joining
audience
today.
had been muted. I was curious. You mentioned that this is called safety.
Oh, Salim, you got a little quiet. Can you speak up? No, I think we lost you, Salim.
My headset is low on power, so that might be why.
That might be why.
Okay.
We'll try to get in your question quick.
Yeah. I'm just curious about whether or how this intersects safety by design intersects with the privacy by design framework that was developed by Ann Cavoukian.
You know what? Anne Kavukian is a huge inspiration. I was at a data protection authorities conference in Madrid back in 2009 when she released those. Um, Obviously they're different practices. One of the things that we did a little bit differently, and it's definitely an inspiration. We worked with our own privacy commissioner here in Australia to make sure that you know, that they overlap and the intersection was very clear. And we work very closely together because we actually do see privacy and safety as intersecting rather than necessarily mutually exclusive. But what we did really differently, a lot has changed in terms of different human rights frameworks like the UN General Comment and others, the Lanzarote Convention. We looked at a range of different human rights and sort of ethics-based principles that we kind of layered onto this. You'll see that there are some intersections, and of course, in the broader with the broader pillars of user empowerment and autonomy, you need the same thing with privacy that you do with safety and service provider responsibility. Clearly, with laws like the GDPR, those are pretty entrenched through global regulation. And I think that's the difference here is you really don't have that bookend or that comprehensive regulation for safety that exists like the privacy and the data protection world. But interestingly, being here in Brussels, there will be soon. I think the European Commission is talking about the Digital Services Act, which will have some pretty heavy penalties. But luckily, they're also talking about safety by design as well. I think the way I would describe what we have a graduated set of of powers, and we look at safety by design as being those voluntary initiatives at the bottom that really does provide the framework. And if you're doing safety by design and ostensibly privacy by design well, you will be compliant, you will be living up to the processes and systems and the standards that governments are expecting from a privacy or from a safety perspective. That makes
Phenomenal.
sense.
Great answer. Thank you. All right. Well, does anybody else have a question? You can use the hand raise emoji. Okay, great. Give me 1 second here. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and I'm going to amplify you.
Hello?
1
Hello.
second. 1 second. I want to make sure to amplify you. Okay, great. You should be amplified now. So please ask your question.
Yeah, hello. I'm Johnny with AR Post. I'm curious about you're talking about where children are with kind of assessing risks and things like that. I feel like in a lot of places, children aren't so great with assessing risks, but they're also super good with a lot of these technologies being as they are, like digital natives. And I'm sure that that's a kind of complicated interaction. Can you tell me how we know or understand what they know and don't know about using these technologies in these spaces, given these kind of conflicting understandings that I'm sure that they all have? Thank you.
Well, that's a really tough but really great question. I mean, I guess talk about the perfect storm. If we all go back to the time when we were young, of course you're going to push the boundaries, you're going to take risks. If somebody tells you not to do something, it's going to make you a little bit more curious. And I think it's wrong if you look at think about where the burden for safety is right now. If you think about an inverted pyramid, right now it's children that are at the top, and also vulnerable communities. Then you've got um, the harried parents underneath, or the NGOs, trying to support at-risk communities. You have governments sort of dabbling in the middle, and then you kind of have the technology companies at the bottom in terms of care. What we need to do is flip that triangle so that that the technology companies are taking the most responsibility, that governments are help nudging them along, we're empowering parents, and then children have less to worry about. Because I don't know. We talk we have education programs that start for 0 to 5s. Obviously we're not targeting toddlers themselves, we're targeting their parents, but 42% of parents tell us that their 2-year-olds have access to a digital device. By the time they're 4, that's up to 94%. And usually it's, the iPad being used as a digital babysitter, but it's not a passive entertainment device like the TV our moms put us in front of. So, we're teaching parents to teach their kids when they hand over those digital devices to do that basic digital hygiene and talk to them about being safe, being kind, asking for help, and making good choices. By the time they get to primary school, we talk about the 4 R's of the digital age. So, respect, responsibility, building digital resilience, and critical reasoning skills. And the critical reasoning skills that I think are challenging, that comes with life experience and maturity. But now we're asking kids to discern fact from fiction, or a fake or imposter account, or somebody who might be grooming them. And you know, predators are just that. They are able to identify kids that are at risk, and they know how to talk to them. There are actually manuals that my investigators found on the internet during COVID on how to groom a child when they're kind of sitting prey to them. So I think we need to do more to arm them with those critical reasoning skills. I mean, it's not just grooming; it's everything from fake news to, was my best friend Johnny actually bullying me, or was that somebody using a fake or imposter account? So I would say we're starting to make progress, and I think the only way you can actually reach children authentically and work towards behavioral change is by having young people involved in the co-design process. And that's what we tried to do with this. And you have to keep reinforcing messages, and you have to use pedagogies that are constructive. And we've done a lot of work on looking at frameworks. Like if you use fear-based messages or you're judgmental, you wag your finger at young people, they're going to tune out and it's not going to work. Or if it's just a one-off presentation. There are things that we need to keep reinforcing with kids. We can't put the total burden on them, but I think we have to arm them with, more critical skills to question everything.
Okay,
That makes
phenomenal.
sense.
Well, I want to be really respectful of your time. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here with us. It's been a total pleasure to have you. Let's all give her one more round of emoji applause.
Thanks everyone for showing up. Oh, it's like it's emoji love shower. Thank you. Love it.
Yeah,
Thank you everyone.
absolutely.
Have a great conference.